Those two little calves haven't quite figured out how to do this yet, but those calves just walk underneath that wire no problem, so I'm not worried about them. Good morning, boys. How we doing? Well, now that is something I'm surprised to see. That is an immature bullfrog. He will get a lot bigger than that. But we used to have those around here when I was a kid. They were very, very common. And I really haven't been seeing them the last few years. So I wonder if they're making a comeback. We got another busy day on schedule today. I've still got to run over and check the cattle at the winter pasture. I've got to do some work in the walnut orchard today, and if all goes according to plan, I will start cutting my hayfield this afternoon. That's what's going on today on Farmer Tyler Ranch. A couple days ago we were having some problems with cattle jumping over this cattle guard and getting out on the driveway here, and I think the main issue, well, we got two things going on here. One, this cattle guard's got a bunch of dirt and leaves filled into it, and I think the cattle decided that they could probably get over it. And two, this cattle guard is probably not really long enough. One can actually clear this in a single bound if they have a mind to do so. So until we can get this cattle guard fixed up, I gotta run this panel across it. It's kind of inconvenient, but not as inconvenient as catching cows every day. At least I'm pretty sure they were jumping the cattle guard. I never actually saw them do it, but I did see a lot of tracks around there, and it looked like some scuff marks on the cattle guard itself. And since putting the panel up, they haven't gotten out again, but I've been definitely keeping a closer eye on them to make sure that that remains to be the case. Eight, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. The trouble of it is that the brush is getting so tall over here that it gets really hard to count these girls, because one could be standing behind a big clump of thistle somewhere and you wouldn't see her. I did count all 19 this morning though, and I mean, honestly, at this stage in the game, that's kind of what I'm looking at, is just, are they all here? Because everyone's had a calf already. Any sort of other issues would really jump out at me pretty quickly, but as long as everybody is here where they're supposed to be, that's mostly what I'm worried about right now. Calves are certainly starting to get big, and that means that we're getting awfully close to the time where they're gonna need to run through the chute, get their vaccinations, and get castrated and all that fun stuff. I imagine that's gonna be coming up here in the next couple weeks or so. But everything looks good here, so let's move on to the next thing. I'm out here working in the walnut orchard today, and I don't hardly ever film out here, so if you're new to the channel or this is the first time that you've seen the walnut orchard, let me give you a little background. This belongs to my parents. They've got about 20 acres of Chandler walnut trees here. And today, my job is to go around and spray suckers. Suckers are these little shoots that grow below the graft off of the rootstock of the tree. A question that I have been asked countless times whenever I show anything in the orchard here is, why do the trunks of the trees look so weird like that? What you're seeing is the result of a grafted tree. What that means is that a rootstock variety would be planted. In this case, I think this rootstock is black walnut. And then once that rootstock grows up, you cut it off and you graft your nut variety, in this case Chandler. So the result is kind of like a Frankenstein tree, where the root is one variety and everything most everything above ground is a separate variety. And I know some people that know a lot about this are not gonna love my definition or way of explaining this, but that is the basic idea. What suckers are they're shoots that are growing up off of the rootstock. If you notice, these suckers have very different looking leaves than do the rest of the tree, because the suckers are black walnut and the leaves on the tree are Chandler leaves. We want to get rid of the suckers because if we don't, they just kind of make a mess of the tree. You can see now how much they're growing already. If we were to just let these go, they would continue to grow and eventually they would become their own tree. That's what the rootstock is trying to do. So not only does this mess up like any foliar application that we might want to make to the tree, but these suckers are stealing nutrients from the grafted variety that we want to flourish. Why go through all the trouble to graft a different variety of walnut tree onto a rootstock variety of walnut tree? Well, it's pretty simple, really. Black walnut and other varieties that I don't have on the top of my head right now, but other varieties that are used for rootstocks just have better root systems. They have better anchorage, stronger, might be more resistant to disease, whereas the nut variety, in this case Chandler, produces a better nut. So you're taking the best aspects of two different varieties, combining them together into like a super tree. And ironically, every walnut grower that I've ever met does not list Chandler as being their favorite tasting variety. But the reason why we planted Chandlers and why virtually every other walnut grower in this area is growing Chandlers is because they are the best seller. And this is not because of the flavor, it's because they are the prettiest nut. And you got to remember, when people are in the grocery store making a decision on what to purchase, you eat with your eyes first. And when people see Chandlers, they look like they would taste good, so that's what people want. A lot of people don't realize this, but walnut trees have flowers, just like almond trees do, although walnut tree flowers are not nearly as pretty. You can see a bunch are on the ground here. The tree has shed them for the year, so we won't see blossoms on the trees anymore, but if we look around, we can find a bunch of baby walnuts. Spraying suckers is not the funnest job in the world, but it is necessary and it does need to get done. So we better get back to work. All right, suckers are done. Let's move on to the next thing. Let's go cut some hay. Well, before we get going full steam ahead, I need to measure these windrows and make sure that they're gonna fit in the pickup on the baler. And in order for that to be the case, they need to be 5 feet or less. I think I need to pinch that down just a little bit. We're a little over 5 feet. Try it again. I'm several passes in now, so I feel comfortable talking to the camera. When I first open up the field, I usually put the camera down because that's the time when it's most likely for something to go wrong. So Not that I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing now, but on those first few opening passes, you gotta pay double attention. A lot of people have been asking in the comments about the hay field, how it's doing, when we're gonna cut it. Well, obviously you know when we're gonna cut it now. The condition of this field is a little bit different, I guess, than it normally would be. This year, as many of you guys know or remember, we got a ton of rain, and usually on a grain hay field such as this, rain is your friend. You need rain, obviously, to make it grow. But there is such a thing as having too much of a good thing. I think what happened this year is the first rainstorm that we got after I planted sort of like melted the clods on the top layer and basically caused the ground to crust over. And because of that, it made it hard for a lot of these seedlings to break through that. This was apparent to me in the sort of patchy way that this crop germinated, and it also didn't help with all the moisture that we got after that. There were many times after we would get a big rain that I would come out here and there would just be standing water out in this field. In fact, it wasn't until maybe a month ago that I was confident that I would even be able to cut the field. It looked really bad all winter long, and just here in this last month, as we've gotten the warmer weather, it's really woken up. The hay that I'm in right now is decently tall, but what probably doesn't translate on camera is that it's pretty sparse. It's not as densely populated as what I would be used to seeing out here on a normal year. This becomes really evident in the size of the windrows. I can tell that they are a lot smaller, and I'm just hoping that I can get enough hay off of this field to where I don't have to buy any. Well, normally I would stay out there and cut for several more hours. I mean, it's not even dark yet, but tomorrow morning I have to wake up really early and help a friend of mine gather cattle. It would be wise of me to get home, get some dinner, and get a good night's sleep before I do that. Hopefully I can get that finished tomorrow, and I'm guessing in about 7 days or so, it ought to be ready to bale. Normally it takes a little bit longer than that for that hay to cure, but because it is pretty light in a lot of spots and we're due for some really hot weather, I think that's gonna speed it up quite a bit. It's that time of year. There's just so many things to do and not enough hours in the day or enough days in the week to get it all done. Thanks for hanging out with me today, guys, and I hope I'll see you again on Farmer Tyler Ranch.